Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, Producing Artistic Director here at the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. I am Tina Brock, your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation, coming to you today virtually from the French Quarter in New Orleans, where Tennessee Williams spent a great deal of his life writing, and it seemed like the perfect time and place for us to have a conversation with two very favorite guests, Joanna Rotté and John Zak. John Zak, of course, an actor here in Philadelphia, and John and I were on stage together in the Eccentricities of the Nightingale back in 2018 for the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium. And Joanna Rotté, of course, Professor Emeritus at Villanova University, the author of several books, including Acting with Adler. And we had Joanna in the show last year, and we had such a wonderful opportunity to talk about just all kinds of favorite and special things about all things Tennessee Williams related and Beckett related. So I'm so very delighted to have her back on the show, and delighted you're here with us today. I hope that you will put your questions in the chat box, and I hope that you will, if you're on Facebook Live, welcome. And to all our friends who are joining us from Europe, you have been great and steady companions for us over the last year, and this is our opportunity to share this time with colleagues in the Philadelphia region and around the country. So without further ado, today's conversation about the works of Tennessee Williams, I'd love to have to the table right now Joanna Rotté and John Zak. Welcome to Into the Absurd. Hello.
Hi, Tina.
Hi,
John.
Hi.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you back. It seemed like a conversation that was perfectly suited for a summer day, and John and I have been talking about when we get back out on the stage for the IRC, Tennessee Williams, the two-character play is the one that we're looking at. And so Joanna and I got into a conversation about that play and decided, let's just talk about Tennessee Williams. It seems like the perfect time. So I think, Joanna, I'd like to start back with your time at the Stella Adler studio and your association. You, of course, wrote the book Acting with Adler, and I know you have fond memories and many stories about your time there. So I'm wondering if you can kick us off with how that time spent there intersected Tennessee Williams.
Yes, well, I'd like to jump a little bit forward to 1983 and then go back, because 1983 was the year I finished my doctoral dissertation. And it was February of 1983. And I remember that my dissertation advisor called me to tell me that Tennessee Williams had died. And it was just at the time I was defending my dissertation and receiving the doctorate. And my professor said, if this were Europe at this moment, they would be naming a boulevard Tennessee Williams. But this is America. So jump back to Stella Adler. Stella certainly was the person who most introduced me to Tennessee Williams, and particularly to Streetcar. And she, of course, was also the teacher of the great Marlon Brando, who played the original Stanley Kowalski, both on stage and on screen. I studied Williams with Stella, and the thing I most remember her saying is that this material will be in the libraries around the world for 100 years. And I would say now, I think maybe 500 years, if not 1,000 years. It's almost been 50 years since she said that. So he's well on his way to being in the libraries of the world. Horton Foote said, Tennessee Williams, the playwright Horton Foote said, Tennessee Williams gave us a world that most people weren't used to seeing. And he didn't apologize for it. So I think it's really important for us in terms of understanding Williams to say what was that world that he gave us that nobody had ever seen before. And that's what Williams is the person who brought us a world that nobody had ever seen before. And he did it poetically with language that we've not seen since, except perhaps in the plays, except surely in the plays of August Wilson, but poetic language beyond anything that's been written since. And he's funny. So that world, as Stella taught it to us, and as one of my other professors, Harold Clurman, who then became a friend, taught it to me, was a world of fugitives, people who are frightened, misfits, outcasts, somehow weak or broken, trapped, no exit, nowhere to go, and lonely. But they are genteel. They have an aesthetic sensitivity to beauty, to kindness, to generosity, a true, in a sense, non-religious sense of spirituality. And they're very poetic people who, like Tennessee Williams, cannot save themselves, cannot unequivocally save themselves. So they're misfits like Blanche in Streetcar, like Laura in Glass Menagerie, and they come up against societal forces like Stanley Kowalski, who are forward momentum people on the move, who are raw energy, who are the materialistic face of society, going forward for power and money, and they are leveled, devastated. So at the end, Blanche is just about taken off in a straitjacket, but because of the kindness of a stranger, the doctor is not removed in a straitjacket, but nevertheless, like Tennessee's own sister, is removed to an institution. So that's the Williams character. And that theme of that conflict between this poetic sensibility that is Tennessee himself and this raw societal force that is America. And heaven help us, we've seen it so flagrantly in those past 4 years we've just survived. That's the conflict that he dramatized all his life. And I love this quote from Arthur Miller that I want to share. Arthur Miller, who is not at all a Tennessee Williams kind of playwright, but utterly appreciated him, said his theme is perhaps the most pervasive in American literature, where people lose greatly in the very shadow of the mountain from whose peak they might have had a clear view of God. It's the romance of the lost yet sacred misfits who exist in order to remind us of our trampled instincts, our forsaken tenderness, the holiness of the spirit of the human being. A little bit more about Stella, would you like, Tina?
I would like, I'm thinking as you're talking about this, and we were talking about this before the show, we'll get to it in a little bit, Joanna, that you directed a production at Villanova of Summer and Smoke. John and I were in a production of The Eccentricities of a Nightingale, and we were uncovering some very real differences in those plays before the show. And just thinking about our production over at the Bethany Mission Gallery, which was done amidst a gallery of outsider art that just is shouting out and emitting all of what you just spoke about. And that's where my mind was going as you were giving us this quote. But yes, please take us back to Stella Adler, and we'll jump forward later.
Wonderful. Yeah, so in a sense, it's what to do if you're Tennessee Williams. And he shared with Harold Clurman, when Clurman was directing the premiere of Orpheus Descending, that if he didn't write, he would go mad. And Clurman understood from that Tennessee used, or he, through the plays, he connected. And over, there's a sense in the plays that the choices, in two character plays, Zelda says that between the first wail of an infant and the last grasp of the dying, it's all an arranged pattern of submission. That's what our lives are, an arranged pattern of submission that's been prescribed for us by the society, unless we escape into madness or acts of creation. So Tennessee understood that that was his choice, apparently. He could go mad or he could do an act of creation. And that's very like Beckett, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Who said that there is no salvation, but he can write. It's all suffering or one is creative. So when Stella taught Streetcar, I think about this a lot, that Marlon redefined acting and the possibility of the male body on stage, which until that time had been either a gangster or a gentleman, a father, and a few other things in between. Brando, Arthur Miller said this: when Brando took off his shirt on stage as Stanley Kowalski, and Arthur was there on opening night, women in the audience fainted. This had never been seen before, this gorgeous male body. So he was naked to the waist. Brando, Stella went to a dress rehearsal of Streetcar. Brando was still very much connected to her and had just, in a sense, finished being her student. And she asked after the rehearsal to go backstage and speak to him. And he refused. He said no. And she went back opening night and she said the entire performance was transformed. And she understood why. He knew he hadn't had Stanley. And what he found in that 5 days was Stanley's lazy mouth, his kind of slurred speech. What, you think you're a pair of queens? He hadn't had that. And she said, this man who went to military school and had impeccable diction had found Stanley Kowalski's speech. And she said he took the play, not the character, the play, and put it in his pocket. And in some sense, I think that was a problem for the play, because the women in the play, or the women who played, like Jessica Tandy played Blanche, and then Vivian Leigh, as we all know, played in the movie, it never became their play. And it is Blanche's play. But Brando was so powerful in it and so redefined masculine acting that he took the play, and it belongs to him now. I can't imagine any man ever successfully playing Stanley Kowalski, though I think Alec Baldwin, though I didn't see it when he did it, he probably was much better for the role that Tennessee Williams wrote than Marlon Brando, in the sense that Brando always brought this, a sympathy for the character. And it's not that Stanley Kowalski isn't sympathetic, but not to the extent of long-sufferingness that in that Stella that Brando got. So Stella most importantly said that in that play, Stella Adler, Tennessee admires Stanley because of his go forwardness. He's captain of the bowling team. He's going to be the guy to follow. But Tennessee loves Blanche. And that's the difference in these misfits that Tennessee wrote, particularly women, who he asked that we experience with compassion. And at the same time, he allows us to laugh at them, but that we must get that they don't belong, and that they're peculiar, they're unprotected, they're innocent, they're injured, they're estranged, they're weird, they're defenseless, they're abandoned, they're maimed, and he's going to redeem them for us by compassion. So with all that, for me, where I've arrived after all these years, I used to teach Tennessee Williams. John Zach there was one of my students in script analysis. He may remember a little bit of it, but
I do.
What I have come to understand that I probably didn't back then, John, when you were a student, is that compassion that Williams manages to evoke, it isn't just for Blanche and Laura and Claire and Felice in the two-character play. It's for us to understand this unprotected, injured, estranged, weird, peculiar part of ourselves that even Stanley Kowalski has, because he's a little bit dumb.
Yeah.
And Williams allows us an invitation to identify with that part of ourself that is broken, and to bring compassion to that, so that the other is also me, the ostracized part that I've ostracized of myself. And that's in my years of looking at Williams, I think the most important discovery that I made that is Williams' great gift to all of us. And why is he able to get it? Because he lived it. He was other, quintessentially other. So I rest there with laying out what I got from Stella Adler and what Tennessee Williams has given me.
Yeah, I just want to say, I very much remember script analysis, because every play I approach when I was at Villanova, I really had very little background in theater at the time. And so that was my real introduction to theater. And so script analysis class was just breaking every little thing down into its essential part, and how it fits with that larger part, and that larger part fits on the next page to this part. And it's just a fascinating exercise in working with words and language and text. And every play I approach, I do everything that I learned from that class, because it's so, I'm not going to curse, but it's so darn useful.
ahead, John.
Yeah. No, that's just that. It's and Williams is it's like Shakespeare in the poetic quality and a character of his that I always think of as Lear. Talk about broken and the misfit. He doesn't fit in the world anymore. And in working with Eccentricities and now the two character play, both characters, Claire and Felice, are so damaged and struggling and vibrant, wanting to move forward but can't, and they struggle so valiantly to hold their head up while the world is condemning them, and or at least that sense that they have.
To give a little context to it, it's a brother and sister team that are traveling around the country doing their theater, but are meeting less robust audiences as they go, but they're also grappling with a tragedy in their family that gets played out between them. And in reading the play, just doing the read through of it, and Joanna, you and I were talking about it a little, the themes are just so large. The demise of theater, the demise of a relationship, the demise of a family. And I don't know how you felt, John, but just in reading through it. And I wonder, Joanna, if you can speak to when you were working on Summer and Smoke for Villanova. Do you feel that there is and we've talked about this in regards to Beckett in the past, do you think that there is an actor that is a Williams actor?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I mean, every actor is all things, yes. And then some of those parts being all things just aren't accessible yet. And they'll grow into it, or they'll die and be reborn as an actor and do better next time. But yes, and the casting of Summer and Smoke of Miss Alma, who is we're in the 20th century, in like 1920s, I think, is that right?
Yes.
In the 20s. And I directed this in 2004. And she's 28 years old, and so she's already a spinster in that world at that time. And she's very puritanical. She is one of these lost misfit women. Her mom's crazy, selfish woman, and her father is a reverend. And she's in love with the man who lived next door to her all his life. But I was sure I knew at Villanova who I was going to cast. And it was a lovely actress who was on an acting scholarship. And I had worked with her before outside Villanova. And then this other woman walked into the audition and she read, and I went, oh my God, I can't cast this other one. And I turned to the team, the design team, and everybody was like, this woman. So I ended up casting the original thought person as Rosa Gonzalez, who is the kind of sex interest in the play. And I cast this other woman, Elizabeth, as Miss Alma. Why? Because she had a Williams in Miss Alma emotional quality. However, that was there. It was in the performance. But about a week before opening, I realized she didn't have the body. Elizabeth is tall and she's statuesque and she has physical power. And she would be like loping across the stage. And it was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. And I couldn't, and she was healthy. And Miss Alma's not healthy. And she's psychologically not healthy. And I said, these women are neurotic. And that's the part of ourselves that we don't acknowledge. So what to do. And my set designer, may he be resting, was Hiroshi Iwasaki. And he said to me, you got to work her. She doesn't have it. And I was exhausted. And we were going into tech. And I said, I can't. I don't have anything left. And he said, you have to. She can get it. So that, right after that, Elizabeth came up to me and she asked me to change a line in the play. And it was, she's always popping pills, Miss Alma.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she wanted to change it. Instead of these little white pills, I need some more of these little white pills to change it to my prescription medicine. She wanted me to change the line. And I said, I can't do that. There's so much connotation in little white pills. It could be anything. It could be that she's addicted, which she is, to some kind of upper, to some kind of tranquilizer. It's got to be left at that. It can't be like it's all sanitized. No, Elizabeth, we're not going to do that. You're going to say little white pills that you have to have. And she got it. And she got that Miss Alma is off. And I swear within an hour, her way of walking changed. She became fragile. I'm getting chills now. It was utter transformation. It was tech weekend. And from then on, with those little white pills, she turned to Miss Alma. It was astonishing. Wow. And then she was there on opening night. And I will never forget her parents, who were these statuesque, 6 foot tall man and woman, came up to me and said, we have never seen our daughter in such a condition with such authentic kind of acting. And so there's so many lessons in that. But it's to answer your question about, is there a Tennessee Williams actor? You have to find that in the actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because actors can't walk around with that vulnerability. They'll be killed in the profession. And we know that, John, right? We know that you want to be vulnerable, and yet you go to an audition and they'll crush you.
Yeah.
So it's got to be evoked. And somehow, Hiroshi urged me on, and I was able to rise to the occasion to invite Elizabeth to find that through Tennessee's line.
Yeah.
That scene, there are some significant differences in the two plays, the Eccentricities of Nightingale, which was written after Summer and Smoke, that we were talking about before the show, not the least of which is that there are no other love interests in Eccentricities. John Buchanan, that you, John, played, is really, Alma is the only, it's not like there was anyone else that's fighting for his attention. And I think that produced some, what seemed like pretty significant differences in the playing of that. I'm thinking about the little white pills and the scene in Eccentricities, John, where, Alma just can't get it, just is falling apart literally, and can't get those little white pills in herself quick enough. Do you have any idea, Joanna, why? Well, I think we talked about this, but why a rewrite might have been done on that, or why a further exploration might have been done without Rosa, the love interest, and that we found in Summer and Smoke? I know that he loved Eccentricities. He really enjoyed the play. And I remember reading that he felt that it was superior in many ways. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember, John, that came up in our rehearsal of it.
So,
it also,
Tina, did he write that after Summer and Smoke?
I believe he did, yes.
Okay. So it was a revision. Well,
yes.
I loved what pre-show, what John said which I do not find for one iota in Summer and Smoke, is that John Buchanan was repressing his homosexuality. And it's funny because when I was directing Summer and Smoke, another thing Hiroshi said to me about halfway through is, this seems like it somewhere might want to be a gay play. And Hiroshi was homosexual. And of course, Tennessee Williams is homosexual. And I said, it's not going to be that because that's not what he wrote. So I don't know, maybe, I have no idea, but maybe John, what you discovered in playing John Buchanan is that what Tennessee really wanted to write, and he didn't write it with Summer and Smoke. So maybe that's why he loved Eccentricities. I don't know. Can I tell you one thing about, I remember this. Tennessee said that Miss Alma was his favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know why? Do you remember what he said?
No, I don't.
Because we both came out late.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And in the case of our production, very late. Because I played it, and I'm clearly
later. And you were
a 28-year-old. I mean, that was, you know, obviously a deliberate choice based a lot on the fact that Jane Moore, who played my mother, was, you know, proportionately, and we wanted to explore.
You could still pass for 28, no problem.
Oh, well,
but
yeah.
but Sir Williams did not have. He says, I think in his autobiography that he didn't, or in his memoir, he didn't have a sexual relationship till he was 28. He had girlfriends up until that time, but his first sexual relationship, which was with a man, was not until he was 28 years old. And he said, and he did not engage in that act that shall not be named, the solo act of sexual stimulation, because he said he'd heard of it, but it never occurred to him to attempt it. So he was puritanical in that sense, like his characters. But Miss Alma's 28, and it's not till the end of the play that, as you know, she enters into her own sense of sexuality.
Well, and that's an interesting point, John, because in thinking about Eccentricities of a Nightingale, when she is in that very final scene in the center square, and it's kind of unresolved as to what actually happens with the salesman. Right, John, if you remember, like we don't really know where it goes. We just know that she, I mean, the choice is to be made and you have to play it, but we know that she has a newfound sense of
herself. Yeah.
Which is that I'll never, you know, my chance just.
Yeah, what did you do with the end? I find it really deeply sorrowful, and
it was deeply sorrowful. It was a hard play to play, Joanna. I mean, very fulfilling, and I was very fortunate to have John there, and a cast of just really wonderful actors who embraced this production concept, which was all of the adjectives you mentioned in the beginning of the show. It was, you know, and in the gallery, amidst all of this art, playing as an actor and being surrounded by all of these images and just this extraordinary electricity of pain, made it challenging and evocative, and just a lot of times very, very, just very challenging. And I think for the reasons that you pointed out, Joanna, that, you know, you're asked to go to these places that may well have larger than, you know, like maybe significant parts of your personality, but still, when you need to really explore them in a way that is quite soul bearing, it's coming to terms with that part of yourself.
Yeah.
That is challenging. So I was very thankful to have that cast. And as far as what we did at the end of the play, I tried to straddle the end. You know, in the gallery, we had the very large fountain, which served as the centerpiece, and the center square of everything, to which there were multiple avenues leading in. A challenging space to play, and a wonderful space to play in, but a challenging space. But I think, John, and just chime in on this, I mean, what I tried to play is you don't really know if she goes off with the salesman who is much younger, but she certainly would have the moxie at that point to do it and not care. You know what I mean? Whereas prior to that, I think it was an aspect in development.
Yeah, I always thought that, you know, she had become the person that society made her become.
Yeah.
And I want to also address the space, the mise en scène of that gallery of outsider art, which is and found artists who use found pieces, and it's amazing, especially for such a play where you know, these larger themes of disjointedness and feeling pushed away and lonely. How do you play themes? And the outsider art is there with echoing those themes, kind of helped aid us. And so you look for those words and those phrases in the text as touchstones, as a guide rope as you pull yourself through this play. It was such a joy to be in that space. The collection that Victor put together is just amazing on its own, and then to have that as the backdrop for just echoing the same themes in the play. It was amazing experience.
So we had some choices, Joanna, there to make, one of which, and this just riled up a whole lot of people, but we had the play opens, right, and they're in the center square, and there is, you know, they're at a celebration in the summer, and there's a band, you know, the community band, or the band that is in every small town in America for every celebration that happens. We know them well, and, you know, John and his mother are sitting in the center square, and they're watching and they're listening. And so the play opened with the band, literally cymbals, you name it, coming up the stairs, of which it's a 2-floor gallery, and coming through. And it was loud, and it was just disturbing. And it was what, you know, understandably people were not expecting and not wanting. But I do think when you embrace that, the reasoning behind it was, if you're going to express this, you know, if you're going to explore this all the adjectives you mentioned, unusual, outsider, just the pain of that and what it means to be that, then you can't shy away from that. I didn't feel like, well, you have to embrace it, put it out there, and say, you know, maybe perhaps too literally, but here's what this play is going to be about. And we're going to crash these cymbals, you know. And I think that, you know, just making, as you say, John, making the space, the characters, the statement that you're trying to say match one another, in the sense of well, this is how painful it is to be in that,
to be Miss Alma,
Miss Alma, right? Mm-hmm. This band represents what that means, and you clang your way through life, and you bang your way through life.
Well, you know, I think that society, that's the Stanley Kowalski, that band. And in Summer and Smoke, I don't know, in Eccentricities, it's July 4th. Mm-hmm. So it's America. Same. It's America moving forward and crashing. And I think the first line of the play of Summer and Smoke is, she says, it's July 4th, they're in Mississippi, or they're in the South. And she says, open my pillbox, to her father, my fingers are frozen stiff. Mm-hmm. It's sweltering. Mm-hmm. And she's paralyzed in the face of America.
Oh, so interesting. Yeah. And in Eccentricities, their fireworks are going off. Yes. And so her first line is, you know, commenting on the beauty and the brilliance and just the electricity of the fireworks. And then she finds her father, you know, in the park, and she sees John Buchanan, and she's just mesmerized. She's mesmerized and falling apart, all at the same time. And her mother's trying to keep her, together because there are people in the park and they already know that this is the family where, the family of misfits. And of course the Reverend's trying to keep it all together. I'm going to get a question in here for you, Joanna. This is from Steve. As someone who has gone and will go again to a good amount of theater in Philadelphia, it seems to me that the full-length plays of Williams are not very much produced here. Maybe I am wrong, but if not, why is this? I should add that I loved Eccentricities and I should have seen it twice to better appreciate it. Thank you, Steve. What do you think about that, Joanna? I mean, is it your experience? I know we first met at an IRC production in 2010 of a never done play called The Gnädiges Fräulein. I think that's when we first met, Joanna.
Yes, I think you're right. Why they are not produced in Philadelphia, I think we have to ask the producers of theater in Philadelphia. It seems like Williams, like O'Neill, goes through cycles of revival. And that happened. There was a period around 2010 when everybody on Broadway was doing Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and there was an Orpheus Descending, and there was another streetcar. So it comes. Who knows? I think the play that you're contemplating doing, the two-character play, is so good for coming out of this pandemic, for this sense, like, John, you keep using the word isolation. These people are in this no exit situation. And for heaven's sakes, this theater, they even get locked in. Mm-hmm. And they're elderly, or they're aging, not elderly. They're aging, and they're maybe at the end of a career, who knows, but everything's ending and they can't escape it. So it's a great play for now. And maybe his later plays, maybe it's time for the later plays to be examined, and Philadelphia could lead the charge on that with your production.
To find a venue. I'm working on it. Let me.
I want to share something.
Yeah, share something while I'm looking at the questions here, Joanna.
Yeah, this was the same year, 2004. It's an email I found in my Tennessee Williams file. And John, I don't know if I ever shared this in class. When were you at Villanova? What year?
Early 90s.
Okay, so this would have been after your time. You were well out in the world performing. But this is from a fella who is no longer with us, who was in the same doctoral theater program as me, and we stayed in touch. So this was some years later. He knew that I was directing Summer and Smoke. He may even come to see it. I don't remember, but he sent me an email and he said, "Quick glass menagerie true story. My mother's uncle, a notorious tightwad, was persuaded to invest in a new play by a new playwright. He put $60,000 in. That's a lot of money, right? In what Glass Menagerie was 45, I think. He put $60,000 in, hoping for a tax loss. The play was Glass Menagerie. When Williams and Eddie Dowling is the actor who helped co-produce and also play Gentleman Caller in the original production. When Williams and Eddie Dowling were desperate to get more money and keep the play alive, they again approached the uncle, whose name was Lou Singer. Singer gave more money, but asked that somewhere in the play, Williams should mention his cousin, Nat Garfinkel. Well, in the script, do you remember? There is a reference to the moon rising over Garfinkel's delicatessen. It's still in the play. It's Amanda that has that line, and it's when they're out on the fire escape, and she says, "You can see the moon rise over Garfinkel's delicatessen," which is apropos of nothing.
Yeah.
And it tells us something about what you just were referencing. producing theater, getting a space. How do you get the money?
Mm-hmm.
So there it was. So Lou Singer allowed Glass Menagerie to come to Broadway, and the price was Garfinkel's delicatessen.
I love those theater stories like that. It's amazing.
John, there's a question about have you played parts in other Tennessee Williams plays, and how did you think about John Buchanan? And we talked about this a little bit earlier before the show. We were talking about the differences in sort of your thinking through John in Eccentricities versus clearly the challenges and the action in the story in Summer and Smoke.
Yeah, I think, boy, if I had to play John Buchanan in Summer and Smoke and then the same role in Eccentricities, my brain would do a contortion that I don't know might damage permanently. They seem to be two different characters. To answer the first question, I haven't had the opportunity to play much Williams. Eccentricities was actually the first. Although I had read a bit of Williams many years before in grad school and here and there, but really. But for Eccentricities, I saw a character who was doted on since childhood of a rather well-established family in a small southern town, the son of a doctor, the human body being somewhat opposite of what the spirituality of Alma's family represented, the dichotomy of those two professions, and the ugliness that is the human body. And yet he can't seem to have the same feelings for Alma, and I that she has for him. And a struggle to achieve that idea of masculinity that and success that was expected of him, and yet always somehow feeling that he's inadequate and always not measuring up. And I drew on a theme of homosexuality for this character, being repressed, not wanting to be found out. And in the final scenes with Alma in the when they get away in that house, he can't still seem to divulge to her how he is, what he is, and has to still talk in measured ways. And so I think it's there in the lines of the text that aren't quite said in the beautiful poetic language that Williams has.
In the hotel?
Yeah, in the hotel.
When they go to the hotel.
Hotel.
Right. And meanwhile, similar thing. It's again, I'm trying to remember. New Year's Eve, I think it is, John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's however many months later. Another celebration, another holiday, yeah.
A new beginning.
Yeah.
That they try to have, that they try to celebrate. And yeah. There is a romanticism. I really kind of hesitate to use that word with regard to Williams. It's like a modernistic mechanistic 20th century kind of romanticism in a sense that I find that he has. I don't know. Am I way off base there, Joanna?
Joanna, you take that one. I mean, I felt it as a person in a play that we were taking the risk by upping her age, whatever. But it just struck me that, I don't know, isn't this applicable for the very reasons you talked about in the beginning of the show, Joanna, that it's a spinster, call it what you will, but it's a person who, yes, I mean, age is not specific to that. And the outsiderness of that is not, I mean, you could maybe argue if she's younger, but I almost think that if she's older and still feeling as though there's this possibility, and then it just blows up in smoke, that it brings another set of tragedy to the table. It almost feels like timeless in a way.
Yeah. We could say the spinster is of the mind, not chronological age. And she certainly feels like she never had a time, and the time has passed, and she never had the time.
Yeah.
She was always put upon by those parents and the responsibilities. Because in Summer and Smoke, her mother is just such a selfish person that Alma has to be the mother to the mother and the wife to the father and run the rectory. So she's not had a childhood, she's not had a teenagehood, she's not had a young adulthood. It's like she was born a spinster.
Mm-hmm. Is the Bible study group is in Summer and Smoke, are they not?
No,
Joanne?
It's not Bible study.
Or is it?
No, it's reading group.
The reading group. I'm sorry. Of course, group. Yes. The literary group. I'm sorry. John, how could I forget?
I love those, and that's when that's the part of Williams that goes into the absurd. Into your territory.
Yes, how could I forget? Yeah. And then she sings at one point. That scene, literally, John. So every time we'd go to do it, we had some just wonderful actors. That scene, it was all I could do just not to, I'm sorry to admit, but just not to lose it, because they would surprise me each and every time. And then I would look over to John and he'd just be like,
just grinning.
Just grinning. Right. That's an awful thing to admit that you were that close to, but they would surprise me so much every time. Right.
You try and play that you're being kindly and meanwhile you're just really holding back laughter.
It's the scene you always look forward to, right, Joanna? It's this because it's a long emotional play in which every scene is just laden with such gold.
Yeah, and she wants John to appreciate the literary aspect of this, and they fight among themselves, and he's like, oh no,
they're arguing. Bob Schmidt was in that group, and Carlos and Cassie, and it is quite a funny scene that really is relief, and at the same time just beautifully illustrates his genius for pushing it into the more, absurd, although it's totally plausible and believable what happened, and it could be any reading group anywhere in any rectory.
Exactly. That's really important.
Any board meeting, any staff meeting, any Zoom staff meeting, anytime.
Yeah, and when I studied it in script analysis with Stella Adler, and then we did scenes, she would always talk about that Tennessee Williams' character is already heightened. Mm-hmm. It's written heightened. And these characters are the heightening of the heightening, the heightening of the heightened. but it's a great way to think about how to perform a Tennessee Williams character that is from the point of view of the opposite. So if I'm playing Blanche, I want to see Blanche. I, the actress, want to see Blanche through the eyes of Stanley. Or if I'm playing Miss Alma, I want to see Miss Alma through the eyes of John. So the way John talks about her is what Miss Alma looks like.
Mm-hmm.
John misunderstands her, and Stanley misunderstands Blanche. But she behaves the way Stanley says she behaves, but not for the reasons that Stanley thinks, right? So his interpretation is off. But what he sees is accurate. He sees her swilling the liquor. He sees her lying. But she says, I don't lie in my heart. He doesn't get that. So she drinks the liquor. She tastes his liquor. She lies about things. And that's all he sees. So you play the heightened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thrill of it, isn't it? To play Williams, is that you play the heightened.
It's such a tightrope.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I'm thinking back onto the punch bowl scene, John, where you come over to the rectory for the first time and I'm just trying to get you, and I can't even get the punch ladled out into the glasses, and I drop the thing into Alma drops the ladle into the bowl. I mean, it's just an all out. She's constantly shaking, and that riding that line between, particularly in that space where it's a small space and people are right up on you. It's not like you have distance from the audience as well. That is the beauty of it.
There's I don't remember the play, but there's a line I recall, and one character says to another, "Are you crazy?" And the other character, Tennessee Williams' character, says, "No, just very abnormal, I guess."
Yeah.
And that's sort of the key to realizing Williams and knowing it's not melodrama.
No.
That these are fully developed human beings who are all somehow abnormal.
Yeah. Well, abnormal in quotes, I would say. It's also with what society has led to. What we established that the Summer and Smoke takes place in the 1920s. My mother was born in the 1920s, and understanding, how my parents grew up through the Depression and the sensibilities that society had and the expectations that society placed upon women. The roles that they were forced to accept. I felt my mother was very much like that. She couldn't do certain things. She had to be at home to care for her parents, and she was the mother, always the housewife as a teenager, and that kind of women didn't go to college. They just didn't, and or if they did, it was to catch a husband. And so society now is just beginning to catch up, I think, to where notions of equality and equity are terms now that are mentioned and talked about in common discourse more and more. But there's, I think, a lot of these the themes of his plays are ever more relevant because of the dialogue that's been taking place.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't even paying attention to the time.
Oh.
Because I was so busy. Just relishing the conversation with you, Joanna and John. Thank you so very much, Joanna, Rotté, and John, for taking the time to come back. Always so illuminating to dig deeper into this work. And I do hope that we can see the two character play have the light of day, because I think it's a perfect play for. And apologies to everyone who put questions in the chat box. Again, we do our best, but I thank you for putting them forward. Joanna, thank you so much for everything, for your wonderful analysis, your many years of just contribution to this city and to this great theater that I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Yeah, and as a former student, I would also like to say thank you. I can take the chance now.
John, thank you for being a former student. And Tina, thank you for your brilliance in hosting. John, it's wonderful to spend time with you.
Yeah.
How very proud you make me.
Oh, I'm going to start blushing now.
Well, we'll get him out on the stage, and I don't know, we may be doing it in the park, but that's okay. We'll just
sure we'll make it work.
We'll find it. All right, thanks so much to the both of you for being here, and I can't wait to talk again.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. And on next Saturday's show, we are going to be here on the 4th of July weekend with Darnell Radford. And Darnell is, Darnell started 2 production companies, Represented Theater Company and Emory. And he's the producer and the host of Rep Radio, now in its 12th season, and the Broad Street Review podcast, now in its 5th season. So we'll catch up with Darnell and we'll talk to him about producing and what is on the horizon for Represented and for Emory and all that he sees. He's got his hands in a lot of different areas here in Philadelphia, and we'll get that outlook and that forecast next week with Darnell Radford. So have a great week ahead, everybody. Thanks so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again on Into the Absurd. Be well.